Chaps, and welcome back to another fantastic episode, and I must say a huge thank you to everybody who checked out Jet Ski's Garage and checked out the video that Benny did on the XB. He did a fantastic job. Also got a few thank yous to do. I noticed that Fuel Burn Media, I think his name is, he gave me a massive shout out. Fat Fords, all those usual guys. Also got to thank the person who randomly rocked up with a tow bar the other day, scared the pants off me because I haven't got a bell in this workshop. He just wanted straight in. Funny, scared me a little bit because I was like, what? Huge thank you to the person who gave me the bonnet scoops, and another thank you to the chap who gave me the missing guard molding for the XB. You guys are just... Oh, and of course in the boot is the air cleaner that was also given to me, which I just can't thank you guys enough. It's just, I'm like, I don't know how to thank you all. It's just insane, the generosity. I did, however, side note, I did actually start a Patreon, but I have no idea quite how to work it. But I did that in a way so that you guys can see videos earlier, have direct contact to me if you need to ask me any questions. I mean, I'm pretty easy to contact anyway. But I mean, if you were feeling super generous and joined on there, that would help immensely because it would allow me to get tools and equipment and things slowly but surely. And early content and behind the scenes stuff. You don't have to. I'm not pressuring anybody. Plus I don't even know how to work it yet, but I've started one. So there's a few things. I'll show you the XB in a second. Alrighty, so the tow bar, I now have a tow bar tongue. Thank you very much to the dude who randomly walked up and gave me that. I very much appreciate it, and it fits perfect. I know there was a couple other chaps who had offered them, and I thank you guys for the offer, but this was local and a lot easier to get. So shout out to everyone who was coming to the table for that one, even though I just can't get over the generosity of you chaps. Now I have a full set of mouldings on the car. Incredible, eh? And this weekend's task. So look forward to a video, maybe Monday or something, because this is my weekend's task. Today's task is tackling some of the issues with this XD, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to butcher it a little bit, not too bad. I'm going to drill out the spot welds through here, do a little slice through there, because I mean I've got to do rust repair there anyway. Slice down through this boot corner, separate those welds there on both sides, and I'm going to put the porta power very slightly just in here and here and here, and I'm going to just crack the quarter panels open just a little bit so that I can get a bit of a boot gap, because it's super tight. It's just insane. And they'd have to have at least 3mm either side to be comfortable, I reckon, and it's got probably one. Ideally you probably want about 5mm actually on boot gap around most panels, in my opinion. So that needs to be opened up. I think it's from when the person changed this quarter panel, and when they put it on, it's just sitting over just a bit too far. And we used to have problems like that in the crash shops doing modern cars. If you got that in the wrong spot, it would hugely affect your boot gap. So one of the things you do when you put on a quarter panel is you'd have the boot lid on so you can gap it. But this isn't the boot lid from this car, because that one was super rusty. So we got another one. So we're assuming that maybe the boot lid that was with this quarter panel was modified slightly. I mean, they are old cars, so you can't win everything. So I'm going to have to actually open it up for that boot lid, which looks like it's a fairly original boot lid. It's going to need some loving in there, but it looks like it hasn't been hugely messed with. It's a bit bent through the back here, but we can fix that. I know a guy. So that's what I'm going to do first, and then, because you can see I've done the lower quarter section, and then I'm going to do this dog leg section. Should be quite easy, and we should be able to tackle this. Also fairly easy, and we'll just see how we go video wise, but we'll get stuck into it and see you in a second. Now that is much better. Now we've got a workable gap. Probably that's closer to 5mm. I mean, the boot lid's still a bit not 100% lined up, but this is the area I care about because it was super tight. You can actually see that the boot lid was actually overlapping ever so slightly. So, and that gap is actually quite straight and lovely up there. So it might actually be that quarter panel that's a bit funky in the corner, but I was working off this one being one of the originals, so we now have a gap. I mean, I could fix that wonkiness right there, but we are now dealing with a gap that's actually bearable, and of course now we've got some wiggle room. So I think this actually whole quarter panel might be slightly too far that way, if that makes sense. So we're gonna have to compromise a little bit. I mean, these cars were never perfect at day one, and don't even think to imagine that they were. I went to the Birdwood Motor Museum the other day, and they have all the concept cars and all the original Holdens from way back in the day. They got the 1,000,000th Holden, 2,000,000th Holden, 4,000,000th Holden, 7,000,000th Holden, and the last one. And you go look at those early Holdens, and the panel gaps are all over the shop like a mad woman's breakfast. None of those cars are perfect. So the deception that you thought old cars were built better is actually a bit of a lie. Their gaps are always wonky. Technology of the time, really. But that is quite good through here. So if this is perfect on this side and across the back window is good, then I can assume the boot lid's in the right spot, and then this one it's alright there, and then it gets tight up here. So I could only assume the quarter panel is too far over right here, but unfortunately there is nothing we can do about that. Whereas the back, we could actually push it out like we did. The top section, that's the way it's going to be, unfortunately. Probably what I can do is just tap the edge of this boot lid a little bit and roll the skin in a bit further just to open it up, but unfortunately we're going to have to live with it a little bit wonky. But so much better, and all we had to gain was a couple of mil in that back panel, so it's not too bad. Hell, we probably only pushed it out at max 2mm either side, and it made a huge difference further up, but I'm happy with that. I can actually weld that back on now. It was a huge concern to me before. I was like, oh, these quarter panels are too close to each other. I mean, other people might do things differently to me, but unfortunately I don't have all the, I don't have all of the great equipment, so I've got to make do with what I got. But at least we've got a bearable gap now, and then we can weld it up and move on to something else. So I'll get that zapped up and then we can move on. Alrighty, so you've just seen me manhandle the living snot out of that boot lid. That's because I think it was dropped at some point. It was kicking around a long time before we got it onto this car. It's been in storage, so I reckon it was dropped on its face. It seemed to be bent through here. But one thing I can suggest to you people, when putting panels on before you do any bodywork, say that's bare metal and there's just etch on it, get it to fit the hole before you do any bodywork on it ever. So it's obviously now fitting fairly well. I've got the foam rubber in there to make up for effectively the boot seal, so when it sits up a bit with a boot seal in, it's going to sit pretty darn good. I mean, it probably needs to be tapped up a little bit through here, but it's pretty close. I was just worried because when I first put this thing on, that face there was literally like kinked in close to a centimetre in there, so it was just like that section was too far in there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to grind down those welds, and then we're going to jack the car back up and tackle the dog leg and run you through that one. It should be fairly straightforward. Not a overly complicated repair. Basically just cut off the outer skin, make a new outer skin, check that the inside isn't rusty, and then weld it back on, and then grind it flat. And then this one over here should also be fairly simple as well. That'll be a real quick one. That's just drill out a few spot welds, put a slice through there, pull that piece off, clean up behind it. If the inside is gone, make a piece in there, and then put this back over the top. Fairly straightforward. And then as far as rust repair goes, aside from a couple of baby ones in the boot lid, that's this car effectively rust free. And then all you gotta do is just focus on a mountain of bodywork, and then we can paint it and send it away finally. So, you know, making progress. I hope you've enjoyed the thing so far. When I cut it, I worked out that I was like, oh, these quarter pounds do have a fair bit of movement in them. So I was like, nah, I'll still put the porta power in it because I can open it up evenly from side to side, and it was enough to give it a gap. So quite bearable. But before, it was no joke, this boot lid was almost overlapping the quarter panel. It was so far in. And they do have a fair bit of sideways slop in the hinges too, so they won't ever be 100% perfect. But what we wanted to do was just have it when the boot lid's in the shut position, that if it does decide to slide side to side, it doesn't actually just smack into the quarter panels while you're driving down the road or something silly like that. So yes, making progress. So I'll do that, and then I'll catch you up when we start on the dog leg. So I've ground down those welds. I was going to just jump to the next scene, but I thought I'd just mention that I did actually very quickly do a minor rust repair through here. Fairly straightforward. Just you get the calipers, measure how far up that fold is, do a right angle fold, then shrink it going that way, and then stretch it going that way so it can hook her in there. So I did that. Put a bit more brass or braze rods through there because they're brazed from factory, and then just ground out the welds, tickled a few others, and then just edge primed it. Now I can shut the boot, jack up the car, and move on to the side. Also, these are very handy to have for holding up panels so you don't get hit in the head with them. So now we'll jump to the other side. Alrighty, as you've seen from that, I've just cut it open, and of course it's, as per usual, it's way worse than you'd think from what you can see. So with this one, couldn't be a simpler patch really. I mean, right angle fold, shrunk through there, stretched through there, and ultimately, yes, I will fix the inside, but that's pretty much, I can hold this with my left hand, the gist of that. And what I'll do is I'll weld through here, and then I'll grind, just because I won't be able to actually put the second fold that goes in there because of all this. I just won't be able to get in there. I'll weld across here and then grind a groove into it with an angle grinder through there, and thusly reproducing the little seam that's right there, but they will effectively be welded together. So that's pretty much the dog leg. Unfortunately, I think I'm going to actually have to cut this video short here, just because I've made it stupidly long with stuffing around with the back part. So yeah, we're just getting into it. I might have to catch up on another video at a later point. I am just trying to get it done, but realistically I'm just going to grind out this blob of brass in here, and I'm going to make another right angle piece that fits in here that goes down with a little divot here, and weld that in, clean it all up, copper spray it, and then just stick this, obviously weld that in. Pretty straightforward. I've left this edge here because, well, there's nothing wrong with it, and it's the door gap too, so ideally, probably in this particular situation, I mean, you could make 2 folds, but then of course stretching it is going to be a bit tricky, so I would suggest that you leave this if you can. Ultimately sometimes they're rusted out and you can't, but you'd have to make do. But you could potentially do it in 2 halves, 1 fold going that way, slice it right down the center, and then do the opposite, and then weld them together, and then you'd have your cap over. I don't actually know if they actually make rust repair dogleg sections for XDs. They might, but I considering it's fairly straightforward, I've never even bothered to look, because I think this would probably be better anyway. But as per usual, it's just surface rust and dirt and junk in there, so a bit of a wire wheel, a bit of a clean up, and a little zap there at a few things, and it should be fairly straightforward. So I hope you've enjoyed a bit of XD stuff. I'm sorry there's not going to be loads on it, because it's actually pretty close to Bodywork and being ready for paint. So I mean, probably do some videos on that, but after this, the next one is the bonnet, and there's a little screen capture for the next episode to follow this one. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's not a terrible video. So we'll catch you on the next one.